Major League Baseball has banned Alex Rodriguez of the New York Yankees for allegedly using performance-enhancing drugs. One of the greatest baseball players of all time is facing the bench for the remainder of the season, and this could cost him up to $31 million. A-Rod has denied any wrongdoing. But what's ironic about this is the biggest doper of our time, the U.S. government, continues to skirt away without deliberation or scrutiny. The Federal Reserve started quantitative easing in late 2008 following the financial collapse and has attempted to stimulate the economy with trillions of dollars of asset purchases. But has it worked? And what exactly is it? Well, let's break it down. Quantitative easing is an unconventional monetary policy used by central banks to stimulate the national economy when standard monetary policy has become ineffective. It is implemented by buying financial assets from commercial banks and other private institutions, thus increasing the monetary base. In the U.S., the Federal Reserve controls the supply of the U.S. dollar and has a number of tools to meet its goals of price stability and maximum employment. First used in Japan over a decade ago, quantitative easing is used as a last resort. Today, nearly 4 years later, it's still in full force. QE, simply put, is when a central bank commits to purchasing a fixed amount of assets. This could be government securities like Treasury bonds, but in the U.S., the Fed also buys mortgage-backed securities to prop up the mortgage market, which our economy is largely dependent on. Well, you might wonder where the Fed gets all this money. Well, it simply creates it by crediting the bank accounts of its member banks. About $2 trillion of this freshly minted money currently sits at the Fed, earning 0.25% interest. The Fed controls the monetary base, or the actual amount of dollars, both digital and cash, in existence. However, banks can choose to loan this money and increase what's known as the money supply. The fear is that the Fed will lose control of those extra $2 trillion, spurring high price inflation. Here's Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke speaking about quantitative easing at the most recent press conference.
The second policy tool being employed by the committee is asset purchases. Specifically, the committee has been purchasing $40 billion per month in agency mortgage-backed securities and $45 billion per month in Treasury securities.
Quantitative easing in the U.S. first began in late 2008 in response to the financial collapse. As we've coined it, QE beta, the Fed continued buying $600 billion in mortgage-backed securities. But after the first dose, the markets tanked, and the Fed announced another round dubbed QE1 in March 2009. It didn't stop there. QE2 was announced in 2010 with an additional $600 billion doped-up dollars, which stimulated financial markets, such as the stock market, but failed to do much to the general economy. In 2012, the Fed went all in and announced QE3, an open-ended economic performance-enhancing asset purchase program of $40 billion a month for the unforeseeable future. But not even that could stimulate the markets enough, because the Fed then roughly doubled it to $85 billion a month just a few months later. And this is where we are now. Here's a clip of Bernanke outlining the goals of QE3.
When our program of asset purchases was initiated last September, the committee stated the goal of promoting a substantial improvement in the outlook for the labor market in the context of price stability, and noted it would also be taking appropriate account of the efficacy and cost of the program.
The Fed said they are taking into account the efficacy and the cost of the program. Let's first look at efficacy. In November 2008, when QE was launched, the national unemployment rate was 6.8%. It rose to as high as 10% since the Fed started injecting the financial veins of the economy, and today it's at 7.4%, still higher than when we started. Looking at unemployment numbers, its efficacy is questionable. Looking at GDP, QE has not done much for the economy either. Last quarter, GDP only increased 1.7%. At least 2% is considered stable growth by most economists. The Fed also said they are taking into account the cost of the program. As we can see on this graph of the monetary base, which shows how much money the Fed has digitally created from QE, it has more than tripled since 2008. The Fed has spent more than an estimated $2 trillion on all the QE programs. QE3 alone has been estimated at $800 billion. Anna Bernasek of the New York Times points out, with the money spent on QE3, the Fed could have given every homeowner in the country a $10,000 loan at a near zero rate of interest. Or with that money, the Fed could have given every citizen of the U.S. nearly $2,600. According to Alan Blinder, as the lender of last resort, the Fed has the authority to lend money to any person, government, or company it chooses, but it's chosen to fill the reserves of the biggest banks. All this monetary doping will eventually have to come to an end. Just ask A-Rod and the 12 other baseball players who are on suspension for allegedly using performance-enhancing drugs. At least they didn't use on behalf of the entire nation's financial veins. To continue this conversation, follow me on Twitter at PerrianneRT.